I was talking with one of my buddies he's 7-year NFL veteran. And we were just like talking about the chronic pain that we are like both in from our playing days. And it's really hard for other people to relate, and they'll be like, "Oh, wait till you're my age." And it's like, I don't mean to be like rude, but it's like you have no idea like what we've put our bodies through, the
Dog
broken
years.
bones, the surgeries, everything that comes with it. But it's the mental wear of the chronic pain. And so to give you guys a little insight, I've had 5 knee surgeries. I've had 4 in the last 2 years, one major one where they had to fix a cartilage issue and put cartilage in my knee. But I've basically been in chronic pain for the last 2 years, and I'm trying to get out of that chronic pain. Would love to hear any suggestions off the bat.
Well, I'll just start because Kelly will have the tactical suggestions, but I would like to say that we feel you as athletes who smashed our bodies in different sports. I've had to have both my hips replaced. Kelly had a catastrophic skiing injury. Like we are on board with you, and both of us have had bouts of chronic pain as well. So, just from a personal standpoint, we feel you.
Well, I think one of the things that we should establish is what is the resting state of the human being? And that is a pain-free state. So it's crucial that we say, hey, we have the right, and the baseline is to be pain-free. It doesn't mean we won't experience pain. I think what we've done is we've set up a society that is so pain averse, and that like if your back is ever sore, you're like, oh, I must have spinal cancer and I've herniated 27 discs. I'm like, bro, you're
right. And you need to get like 16 MRIs and see 17 specialists.
And it is certainly a feature of the athletic experience, and I think what we're trying to do is first and foremost say that pain is a request for change. And what we want to do, and this is tricky because if anyone who's ever had persistent pain or chronic pain, or who has had such severe acute pain that you think your life is over, it is really difficult to maintain a level of optimism and curiosity about that pain, because what you think is, this is the way it's always going to be. I can't bear this, and I won't be able to take it if it gets worse, which is the 3 questions that we always are like trying to persuade people. And these are from Byron Katie. Can you stand this? Yes, you can actually. You can actually make a life and build a life around this. Number 2, if it gets worse, we can manage that too. And 3 is that it won't always be like this. But having had this experience ourselves, we can tell you that hard to be stoked to make love to your partner, hard to be a family person, hard to get up out of bed. And we see that the solutions that we've handed people have been very opiate heavy, very, hey, we're going to put you on, gabapentin. You're going to be on this morphine. It's radio frequency ablation. We're going to basically strip you out of your psyche and your person to try to help manage this pain. And the solutions have been terrible and have destroyed lives. So I'm definitely not a chronic pain expert, but we deal with a lot of people with chronic pain. And this framing is really important, is that we're always trying to remind people that the brain is the most sophisticated structure in the known universe, and that it is always looking sort of for patterning. And one of the things we have to do is sort of begin to try to strip away or separate out our movement patterns from these pain patterns. So if you're working with us, there's a couple things that would do. And this is true we run, we're parts of these big college camps, right, at Cal, and we'll have 100 kids in there. I'm like, how many of you guys are pain-free? And not a single hand goes up, right? So we know that it's a part of the human experience, and certainly part of the athletic tradition experience to have pain. So we're going to be like, it's okay. But one of the books that we give people is The Body Keeps the Score. You got to read this book, and you got to understand that the brain is so clever at understanding trauma and sort of building up protective mechanisms that get hijacked by our brains, frankly. Doage wrote a book called The Brain That Heals Itself, which I think is hugely important. But then Juliet and I are saying always, okay, we've got this intense psychology and there's all the things that can happen there, but are you sleeping? And I know that chronic pain can definitely mess up the sleep quality, but we've got to get you sleeping. And that means you can't just be on, you may have to lay in bed for 8 hours. It means that you cannot just, get up and watch TV and not be disciplined about caffeine. And you got to figure out, some movement to do. You've got to eat fruits and vegetables. You got to get enough fiber and protein. You've got to feel loved and secure. Those are important. We've got to get non-exercise activity in to walk throughout the rest of the day. And those things alone create a state where now we can start to layer in some of these other aspects of this piece. And, it may be on a knee that's had so much trauma that we are going to have a knee replacement someday. That's okay. That's the price we paid for glory. And that's okay. That's totally okay, because Lindsey Vonn just had a partial knee replacement. She's out slaying. I have tons of friends who are, killing it. And it just may be that we've done so much trauma. The last thing I'd say is we absolutely get our butts right in and we talk to our physicians about hormone replacement therapy, especially in people who are menopausal, and in people who have experienced a lot of head trauma, whether that's concussion or overpressure or explosion. We rattle the anterior pituitary.
Are you relating to that at all?
Don't make.
Yeah.
And
I've had a number of concussions over here.
That's right. It means you rattle your anterior pituitary. You actually don't make growth hormone. You don't make testosterone. So we don't think just jamming testosterone into people and then being like, good luck is the solution. Like, we've got to make sure that we're taking a systems approach to this, including acknowledging the psychology of what's happening and sort of some of the training that happens that has, plus the lifestyle, plus the movement. And then we are starting to recognize we do have some really good solutions. And one of those solutions, for example, is this thing we use called H-Wave. And we have been working with this company for over a decade. And what it does is allows us to get people off of opiates and have some on-demand pain relief using electricity. So we can run some high frequency voltage through a joint for an hour and then get many hours of relief so that we can go move, so that we can create a window where the brain says this is safe. And so we're looking very much at understanding pain and not just giving you a talk that like, hey, this is all in your brain at all. It's not. We've got a misperception. And I just want everyone to know that, hey, this sometimes is the result of being a professional athlete, and we haven't prepared people for it, and definitely don't sort of empower people to say, we're going to need you to be curious, and we're going to solve this problem. It's going to take us a while of trial and error.
I just have to add one thing. I want to emphasize one thing because Kelly kind of sailed through it, but it is that sort of mantra almost of saying to yourself, it's not always going to be like this. That has been so helpful to me because even more than Kelly, I tend to be like a health spiraler. If I have pain or something going on, I'm definitely concluding that like it's the beginning of the end and I'm going to die. Or if I have any kind of orthopedic pain, I am convinced that it is always going to be like this and I'm never going to get to do the things I love out of pain. And we had a situation. I've never had low back pain. I've only had it once. We did this river trip.
Imagine your whole life you've never had.
I had a little bit of low back pain afterwards, and I definitely was like, well, I basically went into a mental spiral, decided I had become a low back pain person, that this was my new identity and that I was going to be in chronic low back pain for the rest of my life. And Kelly says this really simple thing to me. He says, I don't even know if like he knew, but he says, well, like 98% of low back pain resolves within 6 to 8 weeks. That's just like the normal time it heals. And literally, and so just him saying that to me was already calmed the spiral. And then it literally, like, it was almost like a joke, like 6 weeks to the day. I was like, oh, I feel perfectly fine. Like, I'm perfectly fine. So I do think the stories we tell ourselves and, having been someone who's in chronic pain and having mentally spiraled about it, I think that mantra of like, it is not always going to be like this is so important.
I also want to just remind everyone that this is a team sport, that your partner also is living with chronic pain. Your children are also living with chronic pain. And we want to really wrap our arms around everyone that this is a group effort and that you have to show up and not just put a brave face on, but, have these windows where you're like, I'm going all in, and then I'm going to have to figure out how to self-soothe and calm this down to get out of this. And I want to just tell everyone an anecdotal story. During the pandemic, we lost our gym, right? We were in the Presidio of the United States where we were writing a $25,000 rent check for a building we couldn't occupy. And that was nothing about paying any of the bills or paying our coaches, right? So at the peak of the gym's power, we have to close the gym. And it's so stressful, cutting loose all of the people we've worked with for 17 years. I end up burning a hole in my stomach when I start getting hiccups. And I'm getting 6 hiccups a minute for how many days, Jay?
I mean, it was like 12 days. It was bad.
12 days.
It was real bad.
Where they put me on Thorazine, which is an antipsychotic medicine that didn't even touch it. It's the only meds. Like, I mean, if you're schizophrenic, they're like, here's Thorazine. I end up going on massive amounts of gabapentin, and gabapentin and THC were the things that put the flames out and got me to stop hiccuping. I went through hypnosis. We tried. I mean, it was like, it was debilitating.
Kitchen sink at this thing.
And, you know, one of the things that this hypnotist psychologist came over to our house and he took me through this exercise. And this is really important and I say it around anyone, I'm working with anyone in pain. How do you control a wild bull? And the answer is you put it in a big field. And that pivot for me of recognizing that what I need to do was have a big field, not a little pendant bull, was this little switch in my brain that was like, oh, I can make this work. I mean, I lost 13 pounds. I couldn't.
It was bad.
I was like, I'm going to have to go on disability. I can't make videos anymore. I can't teach anymore. And of course, right at the 13 days is right when the Prilosec kicks in. You start to heal, right? But and then for like 2 years, if I'd get like one hiccup, and I've actually injured myself. Like if I eat dry toast, I'll hiccup.
Yeah.
But my whole family's like,
yeah.
You know, we're going to do it again. You're going to relapse. So I just want everyone to know that like this is going to be a feature of your life.
Yeah, it's part of the human experience.
And it's not you, it's your partner, it's your mom, it's your kid, it's your best friend. And you need to show up and make it a team fucking sport.
A couple of different things I want to unpack, particularly like the psychology piece. So when we're talking about injuries in particular, I always break it down because like you have conversations, you know, with surgeons and they're like, yeah, you know, there is going to be some pain. I'm like, no. Like there's a difference, right? If you're talking to an athlete and you want to uncover, is the pain like psychologically created or emphasized more than the pain really is? I compare it to hesitation. If I'm an athlete returning to sport, one of the hardest parts in coming back, so like, you know, tearing the ACL was going out and competing without hesitation. But when I did hesitate, I'd feel that pain. And so when I'd, converse with my surgeon, that's more of that like self-created pain. But if I go out there without hesitation, I'm like, no, like I trust my leg. And this is where I'm at right now. And it's like, I'll run and jump right now. It's going to feel like someone's stabbing me in the knee. I know that if I do an intense workout for 3 to 7 days after, I'm going to be shut down. It's going to hurt to go down steps. And so that's where like the communication is, where I'm like, it's not me inflating the pain in my mind, but it's how do I psychologically maybe understand that relationship with the pain, knowing, hey, maybe I just simply can't do this again, even though that's not an answer I'm willing to accept right now, but it's that psychological part of the piece.
Yeah, you know, I think one of the problems is we don't have good tools to manage this, right? And the whole culture is, hey, we're afraid of pain. Here's Tylenol, here's ibuprofen, like here's bourbon, here's THC, whatever we need to do to take this away so we don't feel. Because instead of sort of saying, hey, this is normal and it's our body's, defense mechanisms, it's asking for something. And then we use it as a check engine light. Hey, what's going on? So if your knee is achy, we can be like, hey, actually there's a lot of things we can do to desensitize this. This might be, hey, we need to look at your hip extension and your quads are tight, and right, let's look at your nutrition and what's going on? Do you feel safe? I was at the Fort Bragg at a special operations sports medicine convention, and a physical therapist said, hey, I have a tactical athlete, a warfighter who is ready to return, has met all the criteria of return to play, return to fight, but still doesn't believe that they're ready. And I was like, well, that's incomplete rehab. You have failed the person that there's still hesitation. You have failed that person by making sure that their brains are still protecting them for a reason. And what we have to do is be ready to have this conversation. What are your beliefs about this? How are you, one of the things that we do in our surgery protocols and our gym is someone has a surgery, because bad stuff happens. You're going to get hit by a car. You're going to twist your ankles. Bad stuff's going to happen. We never pull someone out of their community. Like one of the things that drives me crazy about our current med model, which is usually sort of this traditional sort of medicine model especially in professional sports, is that there's the physician in the training room, and it's real far away from where all the training happens and all the brothers and sisters are. And so one of the things that we try to do is to say, hey, look, we're going to do rehab. We got to babysit these tissues, but you're going to be in the gym and we're going to be well body training. We'll just happen to do the rest of your sort of rehab training in and around your team. We do not pull you out of your community. And, there's been a couple times in our family where we've had catastrophic spiral fractures in our daughters, broken ankles. And we have seen up front what that means to wrap your arms around and say, you're coming with us. And that's very much part of the psychology here.
We feel like we are experts in 3-limb training programming. We have trained so many people who have one limb that is non-functional, and that certainly does not stop us. We're always like, hey, you have 3 other limbs. Like, come back to the gym. There's so much you can do.
And there's new technology coming out that we're discovering. For example, I'll give everyone, if you're not already on, if you're dealing with some kind of ache or chronic thing, I'm going to introduce you to blood flow restriction therapy right now. So BFR, we work with a company called Suji. Try Suji. That's our BFR cuff. And we love them because they're very comfortable and it's biomedical grade compression. So we can use them at medical facilities, at university facilities. It's that legit, right? There's usually Delphi is the gold standard, but here we have another biomedical grade comparison. But one of the things we discovered, it's not just about hypertrophy. If we can get that leg pumped full of blood, that limb engorged with blood for 5 minutes, we do 30 seconds on, 30 seconds off for 5 minutes of anything you can tolerate, biking, mini squats, sled drags, again, whatever you want, we can create a window where then we can have experienced less discomfort where we can then go train. And a lot of what we're trying to do is signal to the brain that it's safe to load this thing. And it may be that you have ranges like, sorry, bro, we're not going to full clean anymore on that knee, right? Like you got some lunging and some things. Like I want you to spend your credits, not in the weight room. I want you to spend your credits playing. And you might have 10 credits and sport might require 12 credits. That means we're going to spend all our credits where we are. And then we're going to have a strategy to wind that down so we don't keep ringing the bell so your brain says this is unsafe. So what are all the tools available to me that if I'm not a physical therapist, but I'm a coach and I train, what can I do to manage this myself, to tell my brain it is safe to move? And that's going to take a while. The further I am down that blind alley with the truck on fire, I'm going to have to put the fire out and then still back down the alley before I can turn around, which means it's going to take a hot second. That's okay. We got time.
Do you think that there's a problem with modern medicine in general not trying to get to the root cause of problems?
Look, let me just say this. Any physician I've ever met is encouraging, wants the best for me, full stop. They may not have the training or the tools, number one. Or the time, and the setup may be the wrong setup. So you're going to work with the physician, but you see that physician for 10 minutes, show me what the rest of this is looking like. And this is why Juliet and I have spent the best part of 20 years trying to flip over the tables, open up the doors and say, hey, all of this belongs as part of a training conversation and as part of the athlete coach dyad. This is where this belongs because the physician is frankly too far away. If that physician is in your weight room, talking to you, managing you, giving you solutions, here's our CBD, here's our scraping, here's our BFR, then the physician would be like, oh, I actually get to practice the way I want to practice, right? Here are all the orthobiologics that I get to try. Here are all the techniques.
This is what we can learn from
right?
the blood
But
work.
your physician, she is just too far away and it's not her fault. And she actually feels like I don't have many solutions. I can put a cortisone shot in that for you. I put some hyaluronic acid in that for you, or I can do surgery. And that's the only thing I got.
That's their toolkit. I would add too, in the gym, talking about root cause. I mean, presumably when we're, talking about orthopedic injuries, often the root cause is poor mechanics. And the place to solve the root cause problem of poor mechanics is the gym. It's not in the doctor's office.
I mean, if you're missing hip extension, there's no way that knee is going to work like a knee. Full stop. Right. So you can be working on. Look, I was just at an NFL team. One of their all-stars having like knee pain after, let's just say it's a Super Bowl, because it's true, right? Managing that tendinopathy, looking at the hip inflection, not looking at the hip and extension. And the only way we're going to restore the function of the body and get out of this knee pain problem is by signaling to the brain, here are the positions that humans need to have. And if we're just working on that thing in a squat pattern and not a lunge-like shape, we're going to always never challenge the tissues in the way that they need for normative function. And again, the physician is too far away from that. The trainer is too far away. The person who spots that is the coach, and the athlete has to have some real buy-in here. Can I see how many fruits and vegetables and fiber you ate? Can I see how much sunshine you got? Can I see your meditation? Can I see, like, you got to come with this and say, I'm bringing my 50% so that I'm ready to receive the other 50%.
Over the last 10 to 20 years, how has your philosophy changed around mobility and athletic performance and, healing some of that pain in general too?
What would you say, Jay?
Ooh, I mean, I actually think that all our hallmark as a business and a couple and people who are putting out information into the world, I don't think our perspective has changed.
We've doubled down on some things for sure.
We've doubled down on some stuff. And I think our interests have changed. When we started, we were younger. We were focused on trying to help the best athletes be better. We wanted to be really like sick athletes. And then we suddenly became middle-aged. We started hanging out with people who were middle-aged.
Juliet's a 3-time world champion, everybody.
And
so we're clear.
But our interests changed. And that was sort of combined with this giant, fire hose of information that is the internet and Instagram of health and fitness information, which is both a positive and a negative in my view. And so our interests changed. Our interest changed to being, yes, it's sexy and fun to sort of work with the best athletes and try to make them better, but also how do we expand that and expand that work to try to help everyone feel better in their bodies?
How do we take those lessons that we're learning in high performance and actually transform our society? How do I apply that to my 16-year-old daughter who's overtrained in her club water polo program, right? That's, where do we lean in? What technology do we grab? How do we democratize high performance? So I would say that is where we've, again, it was super cool to say, okay, let's be high nerds here and try to win more world championships and Olympic medals. But now can we apply those lessons in other places?
Yeah. And I think we've also really backed into this lifestyle piece a ton. It started first, our first foray into talking about lifestyle stuff was actually talking about not sitting that much. We wrote a book. Kelly did a talk in 2010 at Google called Deskbound. That sort of spawned our book Deskbound that came out in 2014 or 2015. And so our first sort of foray into lifestyle was talking about sitting, because what we saw is that we had all these people coming to our CrossFit gym and then sitting for 12 hours a day, coming into our physical therapy clinic and being curious as to why they had neck pain or low back pain.
Why that ankle is so congested.
Right. Or why they tore their Achilles off on their little mini around the block run. So that was sort of our first observation.
How was the environment affecting human?
Exactly. So we started seeing it first with sitting, and I always think it's so funny because lately that's become back in vogue to talk about it on Instagram. Everyone's like, you just can't sit all day. And I'm like, okay, Kelly and I started talking about this in 2010. We've been telling everyone you can't exercise for an hour and sit for 12 hours for basically since the dawn of time. So that was our first foray though into sort of realizing that we couldn't just talk about movement and mechanics. We couldn't just talk about training, that because we have to take a systems approach, we have to talk about these lifestyle pieces. And now, it's expanded beyond sitting all the time. We talk about nutrition, sleep, all the things Kelly mentioned earlier that are more lifestyle focused. And that's part of the reason why we wrote our latest book, Built to Move, is that it obviously has this core, it still includes our sort of core stuff we're into, which is you got to be able to move your body in certain ways, but none of that works if you don't have these other lifestyle pieces in place, because it's a system.
So where do you learn from then, and what allows you to innovate without losing those core values?
I'll tell you that all the coaches that I hang out with are intensely curious. I mean, I think that was we're like, if you want to work with us and be our friend, you better be stoked and you better be curious. And that the model is, I'm sure we can integrate this more effectively. I'm sure we can get to the question faster. I'm sure we can be more efficient. I'm sure we can look at how we're going to remove things that don't serve us, right? How are we going to help a person in a 24-hour cycle wrap their arms around all the things that we're doing? And what I'll say is, if you're that person, number one, no one exists by themselves. So first of all, it's never just Kelly Starrett. It's always Kelly and Juliet together. That's always it. But then we exist in a community of incredible thinkers and athletes who are constantly talking, constantly innovating, and constantly iterating and sharing their information. So, like, it helps if we're friends with Huberman and Dan Garner and, Andy Galpin and, I mean, all the savage athletes that we're part of. And, if we go and hang out with Kate Courtney, who is, world champion mountain biker and Olympian, we're asking her questions about how she solves nutrition and fueling and what's not essential. So I think what's happens is that we're in this sort of constant open loop where we are always asking. We go to conferences, we talk to people, we'll be at the Stanford conference on aging here again, around with some of the best thinkers and, brightest people thinking about the problems of aging population that isn't doing so well. So we're very much in an open loop. And I think as soon as you kind of crystallize and say, this is the way the world works, you'll stop innovating and you'll stop being relevant. But the rest of it, man, Juliet and I just feel like, shit, we just know enough now to be welcome at the table. Thank goodness.
There's two things I would add to, I mean, we both, and I think it's one of the reasons we work well together, do have this sort of abundance mindset, especially when it comes to business. We've worked with so many athletes and so many regular people that what we see is an endless amount of work to be done. So we've never sort of taken this territorial approach to our ideas, our concepts. I mean, we do need to pay our mortgage, so we want to make a little bit of money, but we are not territorial. We have a real sort of growth open mindset.
We don't punch down.
We feel like the pie is big. There are a lot of people who need help. There's a lot of work to be done, and there's a lot of room for a lot of different people in there. And so I think that sort of openness has been really, I think we both instinctively had that, but I think, if we reflect on it, it has really helped us, sort of be in this community for a long time. And then and then speaking to another podcaster, I mean, to me, one of the coolest things we do is run our own podcast. And even if nobody else listens to it, it's so cool that Kelly and I have this, we're basically in graduate school all the time because we get this opportunity to speak to and learn from all these experts in their field. We just had Dr. Wendy Troxel, a sleep expert, on our podcast. And, Kelly and I we know a lot about sleep and a lot of details about sleep. And, I still learn 10 new things I didn't know.
She's an expert in sleeping with a person.
Sleeping with a person. And so I just think, we sort of have this instinctive thing about the pie is large. There's lots of room for lots of us. Then we're lucky to be able to learn from all these awesome humans.
I want to add one more thing, is that we actually work. We don't just talk about it. And there's a lot of people who used to be about it and now just talk about it. And we still work. I'm wearing a Cal Berkeley water polo shirt. I'm a certified or a credentialed physical therapist at Cal to work with all the teams. So now I have 800 athletes that I get to innovate with and work alongside their coaches and, get texts from the basketball coach and how do we solve these problems. But also I coach a women's team there, the women's water polo team. I'm just on the staff and I just get to be the performance director of their staff. And I don't have to be the head coach. I don't have to be the strengthening coach. I come in and I get to work and see what it really is like in the trenches, week after week, month after month, from years. And if you're not actually doing the thing, it's really easy to be like, look at how fancy I am. But if you're in doing the thing, you're going to be caught in a loop where all you're doing is trying to problem solve the unique people and help the unique people in front of you. And that changes. I mean, if I went back to school right now, I don't think I'd be a physical therapist. I'd be a performance psychologist. That's what the world needs right now, is more performance psychologists.
And we're always, I mean, in addition to Kelly coaching at Cal, like we've always been coaching regular people too. We owned a gym for 17 years. We have this other program we run, which is more digital now, called the Starrett system, where we've got hundreds of people in there that we're coaching on like a daily, monthly, weekly basis. And so we're in there and we're learning from them. You know, every population that we work with, we're learning, how can we better serve them? How can we make this information more accessible and attainable? What is working? What isn't working? We're always willing to throw out things that aren't working. So it's just a sort of deep adaptability and flexibility. And like Kelly said, we're actually out there like interacting with regular people who are trying to do stuff. We're not just talking about it.
And this episode is brought to you by All Black Everything Performance Energy Drink, the official energy drink of the Athletic Fortitude podcast, available in Walmart, Meijer, and select GNC franchise locations. One of my favorite things that you said, particularly about people who work with you, is the curiosity piece. Because sometimes people will ask me what is my podcast about? And a lot of times I say it's things I'm deeply curious about. In particular, right, the holistic view of what it is to be a mentally healthy and physically healthy athlete while achieving, great things, right? That's like the predominant, but there's so many different things I'm curious about that I want to learn about that I can apply. And I just had to highlight because that's awesome. One thing that you talk about is the range of people that you work with. What and how maybe do you bridge the gap between the professional athlete and maybe the construction worker who just wants to be healthy? Like, how do you bridge that gap between the things that you put in practice?
I'll start with that a little bit. I think what we've learned over the years is that regardless of whether you are a superstar athlete or like a mom that lives on our block, most people are not doing the basics and they're not doing them well or consistently. And that's literally true for, a 19-year-old NFL player as it is for a 43-year-old mom. People, the data is pretty clear. People don't eat fruits and vegetables. 85% of people don't eat any. 70 to 80%
You can't
of
talk
people
about
don't move enough.
your pissy tendon,
right,
if you don't have any micronutrients or fiber on board, bro.
Right. So it's different problems, and certainly it's a little bit about like tightening the screws on the professional athletes, and often sort of more like regular populations have bigger they have bigger things or more things to work on, but oftentimes it's the same things. And the things that, obviously there's talent and some things that you can't put your finger on with professional athletes and, the most high level athletes. But, usually what those professional athletes do really well is a few things really consistently and really well. And then even those athletes often have blind spots, things that they just suck at. If it's a 19-year-old NFL player, chances are their diet isn't going to be that awesome. It depends on the athlete and where they are. But it turns out that it's often the same things, just at different levels.
What I'll say is one of my favorite coaches is a guy named Frans Bosch. He's Dutch. And he has a saying, he's like, there's more variation in waltzing than there is in sprinting, which means that low load and low speeds doesn't really matter. You can get away with murder. You can do anything you want to do. But at high loads, high force, high speeds, you start to see the unique physiology of the human start to unify. We start to see people run the same. We really do need full normative range. If we're talking about power, your foot position matters. And so what we start to do is the details which are less important become more important. So we don't go just general physical preparation training and fitnessing. We do into sports preparation training, which means we really start to care about what's going on with your foot pressure. And we start to care about what your shoulder does, so that those skills can transfer over. And we're a little bit more meticulous about asking, why are you doing that? Why is the body making this decision? But otherwise, as Juliet says, principles drive. I mean, just because you're a mutant doesn't mean you're a unique snowflake. I mean, you're going to get fatty liver and, be diabetic just like the rest of us. So you can't eat like a spoiled teenager. And we are seeing that now that it's about money, there's a much younger generation of people
they need to
paying attention, because they're like, oh, I want to get in this game and get paid because I'm sacrificing so much that, one of my favorite hacks is that when we have professional athletes who start to be able to afford it, they buy themselves a personal chef. Boom. First thing that changes that their food quality, they pay themselves first. That is the mark of a total pro. And at the very least, we have them work with a professional nutritionist.
I don't know if you feel like this, but Kelly and I, you're a lot younger than us, but I think we both feel like, obviously we both had some success as athletes, but that we could have been so much better in so many ways at 51 years old, which we both are now. We have way better habits and practices than we did when we were actual serious athletes in our, late teens and 20s. And I don't look back on that and say, oh, well, the system, when you're,
you mean
you're
your
just
bagels
plastic.
and salad weren't
Yeah.
cutting it?
I mean, I lived like my college rowing career eating like red vines and mochas. And it had
Fat-free,
zero recovery tools. I mean, I look back and I don't know if you feel like this at all in your career, but we were so unsophisticated. We had so much left in the tank that we could have taken advantage of as athletes and avoided so much injury and just been so much faster and stronger and better in every way. If we had just been doing the things that now as like, boring 50-year-old recreational athletes, Kelly and I do on a daily basis. I don't know if you feel like
I was the first person to make my friends take creatine when I was 23.
So I laugh because when I was high school, even college, my predominant diet was like Fruity Pebbles and like Cinnamon Toast Waffles.
And you were still fast as fook.
And that's
you could have been a little faster. And
that's
more
the thing. So like I was really fast. Like that was my thing. Like I can run. So for whatever reason, I had the worst diet in the world. Like my pregame meals were pizza. So terrible diet. But I joke about it all the time. Like I eat so differently now. If I only ate like this when I played, but like a huge transition point happened after like my playing days were done. It was really when I changed my diet, changed my sleep patterns. Now kids have interrupted that a little bit, but changed my sleep pattern, changed everything, the way I train, focus on mobility. And the PRs that like I hit, like I never, like in a million years would have thought that I would hit. Like I was jumping 38.5 inches. I was 5'9" and able to dunk a basketball. And this didn't happen until after I was done playing.
That's right.
And I would always say like, and like not in like a regret way, but like a maturity thing. Like I wish I knew this 5 to 10 years ago.
That's right. And we didn't.
Yeah, we didn't know.
And we didn't apply.
know. We didn't know either.
We're starting to see organizations start to care about it too. I'll highlight an incredible organization we work with called the Niners. And a couple of years ago, the owner, Jed York, made the investment in bringing in a full-time chef and feeding the team. And you can get 3 meals a day at the stadium. And that really allowed athletes to stick around. But more importantly, it solved the problem of culture. People get to eat together and interact, and you can always sit down with a coach. You can always be with the other D-backs. And, one of the things that happened was that, we started to pick this up early on. I think in 2010, I was working with Arsenal in the UK, and they just started delivering food to their players. And there was a big pushback. They were like, these like 22-year-old millionaires, why are we delivering them dinner? Because when you deliver vegetables and lean proteins and high quality starches to 22-year-olds, that's what they eat.
They eat that, yeah.
Otherwise, it's it's chips,
otherwise
pizza and curry and Fruity Pebbles. We'll default to our training if you don't know any better. So I think we're seeing organizations start to see it. I want to tell an anecdotal story. We have a physician, Dr. Nick DeNubili, who has been president of the Knee Council. He's been on the Presidential Physical Fitness Council with Arnold. He's a G, and he would talk about doing ACL repairs in kids long time ago, 2000s, 90s, and he'd have to pull out this drill, and he'd just drill the crap out of this rock hard bone. And then in the middle of like the 2000s, he started to be able to turn the coring device by hand because the bones were so soft. And so he didn't need the drill anymore. Like the drill was too much to go through the bone. And so what we were seeing is this systems degradation where we're suddenly not loading, we're not sleeping, and it's no one's fault. Kids aren't insidious, right? But the environment is set up to make all these just choices that are harder on the physiology of the human. And so suddenly you're not mineralizing, you don't eat enough to mineralize, you're not loading right, you don't sleep and recover. And guess what happens when you tear your ACL? Man, it's not an accident that happened. And man, if your bones aren't rock hard, that repair is never going to be the same. And we have to start saying things like this came out 2 weeks ago. 23% of kids sleep 8 hours or more. 23%. The rest of the kids are getting less than 8 hours. There's not a single evidence-based journal on the planet
no data point
that says that a
get.
growing body, and definitely an athlete, needs less than 8 hours of sleep, especially when you're probably, throwing away some of that anyway. So you are basically saying, hey, I'm trying to be elite and I'm trying to manage this pain, but you're not sleeping, you're distracted, your nutrition is shit. And what we can say is the human being is so robust and capable that it can still be extraordinary, but you're making it a lot harder.
So someone like me, at one point in my athletic career where I needed to make dramatic change and make it relatively quickly, how can you synthesize a process that doesn't feel overwhelming and can be applied immediately and get those, progressions that you need?
Well, we have synthesized this into a concept called base camp. We call it the 8. So who hasn't heard at this point of eating 1 gram of protein per pound body weight? Thank you, TikTok. I got so many kids at my daughter's high school who are like, yo, Mr. Starrett, how do I get gains? How do I have the glutes, Mr. Starrett? So, number one. Number two is, man, you got to sleep 8 hours. You got to be in bed for 8 hours. And there's no excuse. You have to do that. And let me tell you, our kids are night owls. And there's systemic resistance to this. California is one of the few states that actually passed a law that middle school and high school can't start before 8:30. And a kid getting up at 6 a.m. is the equivalent of an adult waking up at 4 a.m. Let me just say that again.
How do you feel as an adult when you wake up at 4 a.m.?
You feel like death, right?
Yep.
Not good.
And so one of the things we do is with our 16-year-old daughter, she's a night owl. She stays up till about 11, but she sleeps till 7:15. And I make her breakfast to go. Instead of making her wake up early and eat breakfast, I make her breakfast to go so that we can always. And when she smoked, she uses a Whoop, which really helps, tells her when time she needs to go to bed. I encourage all our young high school and college athletes to get a Whoop because it really does tell them, hey, you're not eating enough and you're not sleeping enough. Exactly right. Whoop has changed the game by changing that behavior. And for our college athletes, they're like, man, I had 1 beer and my HRV sucked. And I was like, isn't that weird?
Yeah,
Aren't we trying to win a national championship right now? Maybe don't drink right now. Let's drink after the season.
But I mean, just to go back to your question a little bit, I mean, we have sort of developed this thing we call base camp, which is lay in bed for 8 hours a night, eat 0.8 grams of protein, eat 800 grams of fruits and vegetables, walk 8,000 steps a day, sit on the floor, do some mobility work, and go outside. That's our base camp. You got to do those things.
Then you can train on top of that.
From a habit standpoint, and by the way, these are things that I don't care whether you're the starting quarterback of the 49ers or you're like a dad, a retired athlete dad in Pittsburgh. These are things all humans need to be doing. And I think some people do some of those things, some people do some of those things better, right? I think everybody needs to sort of take an evaluation of what am I doing well and what am I not doing well in that base camp set of practices, and then start with one thing. I mean, Kelly likes to suggest to people from a sleep perspective, imagine if sleep is sort of a difficult area for you and you have a little kid, so, you're excused. But generally speaking, if sleep is a difficult area
Fred Warner had a little kid. He's still slaying.
How about go lay in bed 30 minutes earlier. That be a single, if you learn nothing else, go to bed, go lay in bed 30 minutes earlier. If you add that up, what is it? In 2 weeks, you're getting a whole full night of more sleep in 2 weeks. If you just go lay down 30 minutes earlier. So I think that we really overcomplicate a lot of this stuff. I think you just need to lay in bed. You need to eat some food that you like. It needs to have some protein and vegetables. You got to walk a lot. I don't care if you're training still, you need to walk, you need to move your body a lot. You got to sit on the floor, do some mobility work. It's not that complicated, but I think people do need to take an inventory of what they're doing well and what they're doing poorly, and then just pick one thing and start with that.
Yeah, I think Juliet and I feel really strongly that we've created an industry, and I think it's a $1 trillion wellness industry of what's your morning routine? What's the gimmicks that you do all day long? We want to strip that back. We want you to just be with your family and your friends, go to training, and then work this in so that it's not a thing that you have to ever worry about anymore. If we're talking about we want you to sit on the floor for 20 or 30 minutes, why you watch TV in the night? You can't do that. You don't watch TV for 20 minutes, just sit on the ground. And so what we're always looking at is how do we remove things and how do we make more expansive? Notice that we haven't talked about not eating sugar. We don't care. But show us you've hit your protein minimums and you're getting enough fruits and vegetables. And then that chocolate chip cookie or that ice cream just doesn't matter as much.
Do you think it's more beneficial to add habits or subtract habits? So I think a good point you just brought up, Do I reduce sugar or do I add protein?
I think the answer is it depends. I think people are often adding what I think would be like fake health habits. They add in, I'm not saying these things don't have value, but, you know, I had a friend who's like, I'm so great. I'm waking up at 5:30 every day so that I can do my gratitude journal and do X, Y, and Z thing. And I was like, literally, there's no habit or practice that is worth missing an hour of sleep for. Like literally nothing on earth. Like there is never a reason you should wake up an hour earlier. You should cut out your sleep from 8 hours to 7 so that you can write in a gratitude journal. Like that's just one of those things where it's like, I have no problem with a gratitude journal. Like that's great. And some things work better than other people, but I think we're doing a lot of fake stuff. And so I think we need to start subtracting the fake stuff and adding in the stuff that actually matters. And it's those things we talked about.
We went to the YPO, which is the Young Presidents Organization, big health fitness conference this summer. Huberman's there, Jay Shetty,
Atia, they're all there.
All the gangsters are there. And we talked to so many people whose health practice is laying in a red bed, and then taking a mitochondrial supplement. Meanwhile, don't load, don't breathe hard, don't eat, don't exercise, can't flex their hips. And we're like, what are you doing? Like listening to Huberman is not a physical practice. So what we want to do is make sure that we're straight up about you're lying. Like we are at a place now where we're very clear. If you come in, I need to see that you're dealing with these things and you're managing these things. Otherwise, it's just a bunch of bullshit. And you are pretending that you're greatly sophisticated instead of just doing the basics over and over and over and over and over. I mean, if you're going to work with me, we're going to squat every week. You're going to we're squatting again. Yep. And we're going to squat till the end of time. We're still squatting because that is one of those basics.
Yeah. So I think, and what I will say is that there's a lot of this sort of gimmicky stuff in fitness that's fun. Like Kelly and I love to sit in our cold plunge and
we love our sauna.
People send us like random fitness devices. Like we love all this stuff too. And sometimes, for those of us who are, kind of hitting the basics, it can make this sort of fitness journey more fun and keep us engaged and entertained. But what I would say is what needs to be stripped out for people is all this fake stuff, and then you're allowed to add those things back in when you're at base camp. When you're checking the box on that list of things we said earlier on a consistent basis, and then you're like, okay, I'm slaying the basics right now, and I'm just getting bored and I want a little gimmicky thing, like, great, let's add in a cold plunge, or let's, add in a mitochondrial supplement or whatever.
But if you don't even talk about your feelings with your friends, you don't have any close relationships, your partner is like, you're a shitty dad, like sort your house first. Then we can talk about should you squat or should it be unilateral? Like there's so much misplaced precision in the world. We call it like the fitness place is it's an easy place to make progress. Bondarchuk is one of the most celebrated track coaches in the history of the world, hammer thrower. And, one of the things that Bondarchuk says is like, man, it's a lot easier to go in the weight room and add a half kilo to the bar and be like, I made progress today. He said, what you need to do is go throw, and you need to throw more and go do the hard stuff consistently instead of the things where you feel like I can make it this easy progress. And that literally apply that to all of the things we're talking about here. And we sound negative, but your body is incredible. Your brain is the most sophisticated structure in the known universe, attached to a body that's the most sophisticated thing in the known universe, with these complex psycho-emotional relationships. This is to be a human being is the greatest gift on the planet. Respect yourself, and you'll be surprised at how your body can turn and turn and turn and be there for you.
I also would just add that, you've mentioned, and we sort of started this conversation about the psychological piece. And our point of view is that if you are doing these basic habits, you actually are creating a ton more capacity as a human because you have sort of fed and nourished the body the way it needs to be. And we are of the mind that will have significant downstream mental health benefits, that it will have the benefit of having more capacity because you're going to show up and be able to think a clear thought at work and be more creative and innovative.
Show up for your family after work.
Show up for your family, be a better partner. We think it's not easy. It's hard to actually consistently do these things, but what it creates is more joy, more capacity, more positive mental health. And, throwing away your black spatula is not going to do that for you.
This is really consistent with a former guest I had. He's the first, and he may still be the only gold medalist from the U.S. to win like a BMX gold medalist in the Olympics. And he talks about everyone wants to be great at the 1%, but nobody wants to master the 99%, which are the basics. And that was his competitive advantage. Obviously, he had, natural talent, you get the point.
That's
but
expected.
Right.
If you're at that level, you have the talent or you don't. But what keeps you there is not the same thing as what gets you there. And that our goal is to apply those same lessons to our family and our community. We think the highest calling of sport is to transform society. And that starts with my household. It's like full stop. Otherwise, sport is just circus. And we're all like, hey, who's got the coolest lion juggling flamethrower thing? That's super cool. But we think that this is the last lab on place. If you want to see all the revolutions in sports nutrition, right, that's funneled into better nutrition diet, it's all come out of sport. Like, you cannot say that anything that we're seeing in mainstream media around nutrition, that all was born probably out of like the Tour de France.
So you guys talked about this a little bit earlier. You've both experienced some serious, trauma. How has that
You mean
changed?
from our families or our knees?
Both. But how has that changed your viewpoint in relationship with resilience?
Ooh, I mean, I will say I'm not going to talk about myself. I'm going to talk about Kelly for a second, because he's a obviously longtime, extremely amazing, sought after, like world-class physical therapist. And then he had to have his knee replaced. And I think that was a real sort of like hit to his identity, even though he had to have his knee replaced, by the way, because of a catastrophic ski crash. Not because his mobility methods didn't work, as some people on the internet might have suggested.
Dicks.
Catastrophic knee crushing incident that resulted he was able to manage it for 7 years and then had a knee replacement. But I think, in my own observation, it has made him a better practitioner and a more empathetic practitioner, because he's actually understood what it took to be able to like be resilient and rehab from a really epic knee situation. Both having the knee injury and managing it and the chronic pain for 7 years, and then also, the surgery and the recovery, which was long and tedious. So I don't even know if that answers your question, but what I see is that he was, transformed and improved, I think, in his empathy for his own patients after actually having to go through that. Do you agree?
Well, I don't know if I had. What I would say is
unempathetic. I'm not saying that. I just think you were able to view it differently.
Yeah, for sure. And
Yeah.
I think, one of the things that Juliet and I have been huge fans of and advocates of is test, retest, share. And when you have come through something that is potentially life altering, and on the other side, by working the plan on the other side, you're like, wow, I came through. And if I can do it, because I'm not even a mutant, like, you should see all my mutant friends. Like, if I can do it, then I'm sure that you can do it. And I think that really did give, credence that, like, what we need to do is just work the plan. And when I mean work the plan, I mean you have until the end of your days to work the plan. And some days you're going to suck at it. You'll have little kids and they'll wake you up, and you're going to eat a little chicken McNugget once in a while and finish a little mac and cheese. And that's probably not great for you. But, I think what ends up happening though, is when you just consistently love to train with people, love to move your bodies, enjoy and play and put those things first, and you love to cook. We see that cooking and eating together is a competitive advantage, that when you learn to cook and you learn to serve your family and your friends, again, I mean, come at you. You're unbeatable at that point.
I'm going to tell you a quick story real quick too. So when I was 46, I was diagnosed with breast cancer, caught it very, very early phase, and had to have a double mastectomy and reconstruction, which is a big back-to-back couple of surgeries. And what what I noticed almost immediately after having surgery is that all these people kept coming up to me and saying, "Oh, like you're just a mutant. I could never heal as quickly as you. And, you look perfectly fine and it's 3 weeks out. And oh my God, you were able to do a pull up at 6 weeks out." Like, obviously they just sort of like put me into this bucket of like, you're over here. I'm not like you. And I thought that was such an interesting reaction because I am like them. In fact, I'm the one who got cancer. So like, what are we even talking about? I'm not super resilient, at least in that respect. But what I knew is that I went into that diagnosis being strong and having muscle mass and having eaten some vegetables and fruits and knowing I needed to prioritize my sleep. So, right, I had mastered those basics we talked about going into the surgery. And then exactly like Kelly said, I worked the plan when I got out of surgery. We just diligently, used the H wave and walked a lot and slept and ate vegetables and like just did simple stuff, worked the plan. So I don't have any kind of superhero healing capacity. I just heal the rate of a normal human. But because I had this resilient physical foundation and because I worked the plan, I was able to have this, what appeared to the whole rest of the world as this insane outcome. I don't think I had an insane outcome. I just worked the plan.
One of the reasons we like the word durable versus like longevity is that, as you've experienced, the hits are going to come and you play a perfect game and you get dealt a bad hand. You get cancer, you're going to get sick, someone in your family is going to get sick. So what we're trying to do is say, hey, how do we create a really, really stable, capable, durable person that can take a hit, and that hit isn't just transferred and just destroys all things. Suddenly I don't know how to exercise, I don't know how to eat, all my relationships fall apart, right? I mean, our contention is that if you're living on this planet long enough, the hits are coming.
One thing you said early in the show that I love, and it applies here, at least from the psychological perspective, is we're really good at telling ourselves stories. And I've reframed any obstacle that I've gone through as this is a part of my story. And if it doesn't have a clear view of what it means, I take it upon me to write it into my own story. Like, okay, I'll give this meaning. I'll define a meaning for X, Y, or Z. And, I also say that there's 2 points in my life where I would be at my own version of rock bottom: when my football career ended and after this major surgery I had where I'm trying to avoid, a knee replacement at a young age because, my wife works. So it was at a point where I would be downstairs in a leg machine in the basement for 6 to 8 hours a day because I wasn't allowed to move my leg. I had to have a machine do it for me. And when you sit there alone, you guys talked about the relationship piece. Like, to sit there in isolation in your own thoughts and not be able to do anything is one of the worst mental spaces I had ever been in. Right.
Yeah,
and
worst.
So the only thing that I knew how to do was A, start storytelling, and B, just pick up my phone and just start calling people, talk to whoever, see who's available, build
That
those
is the worst
relationships.
rehab I've ever heard of, by the way. That's terrible. Terrible.
But so, it's, the resilience piece is interesting because there's the physical, I call it the physical mental resilience, but then there's the mental emotional resilience that you have to build with it.
That's the hard stuff. And, you've got to establish relationships. I mean, Juliet and I, about 14 years ago, Juliet was like, hey, I think you need to get into therapy and talk about how messed up your family is and how angry you are. And I was like, it's probably a good idea. I want to stay married. And now I have these things called feelings, and they're super gnarly and they get in the way all the time.
Yeah, he was like, I learned how to disassociate for so long, and it was so convenient because I didn't feel any feelings. And he's like,
the door down to your heart. Let's go.
He's like, now I feel feelings. This is very difficult.
What is that feeling? And you're like, you're anxious. And I'm like, oh, thanks. I love the old Kelly.
I'm actually very curious. What is your relationship like with your feelings? How do you manage your emotions?
Whew. Well, I tell it after having a year of counseling for myself. I got real good at being able to, let me correct that. I'm better at talking about my feelings, and, one of the things that I'm just putting forward without kind of getting into the weeds here is you better have a plan, and you better have some places where you can be vulnerable and places where you can, seek feedback and get feedback. And I don't think we have that. I don't think we create those, the guys you played with or you paddled with, or, they're your brothers. Have you really had vulnerable moments with them? Can you really talk about struggle? And I'll tell you that the research does not support that. I have these bros who go to war with, they're suffering. I don't know. They've never talked about it. We never create these opportunities where really get to, so part of, there's this, I have come to realize that in performance psych and in sort of team performance, particularly, being a member of a group and belonging is a competitive advantage. And we have to be very systematic and overt about what that means and how to create those relationships and nurture those relationships. And I'll point out the amazing work of Brett Bartholomew of Art of Coaching, the amount of time he spends getting people to talk and to do drills where we actually practice that. I just think it's this massively untapped potential to become great.
I think we also, Kelly has gotten better at this as well, but I think we both realize, at least from a relationship perspective, that we can't also rely 100. I mean, we're like bros and best friends and could literally just be on a desert island together and never get bored of each other. But I think we also do appreciate and realize that, like, I need to have my own friends, and he needs to have his friends, and that we at least need to have that outlet. One of Kelly's best friends lives across the street, and they sit in the sauna together and they just talk about whatever they need to talk about. And I think that outlet for both of us in different ways is really important. And
by the way, today is our 25-year anniversary hanging out. We met at the World Championships 25 years ago.
25 years today
in Chile. I was a little bit skinnier, and I had bleached white hair.
White hair, yeah.
My oh my, how things change. The bleach hair is gone, but
the skinny kid is gone. When I met Juliet, I weighed 187, and now I'm only 230.
Let's see. When I met my wife, I was 160 pounds. I'm now 180 pounds. So I've gained the weight too. But
there you go.
It's all muscle.
No, so it's how do you maintain then your resilience when you work with your emotions? How do you continue to maintain a healthy relationship with resilience and continue to build upon it?
I think we both do have, I am more of a worrier than Kelly. And so sometimes it's his burden as my husband to like manage my worrying self. And sometimes I'm annoying. But I think at the root, though, we both are ultimately optimistic people at our core. And I think we both believe in some way, shape, or form it's going to work out. And I think that does drive both of us and keep our mental health pretty intact. And I think we also try to bring the energy to the world that we want to experience, which is we're stoked. We have a positive vibe in our household. We try to maintain a positive vibe. Sometimes we go out in the world and it's this weird piece of feedback we get from people at like conferences or whatever. And people are like, you guys are so stoked. And we are like, what? Like, that's like a weird thing.
We're not trying to love bomb you.
No. We're not putting on an act, and we're not some weird fake thing. But like, we actually genuinely are like stoked about our kids and our life and our household and our friends and what we get to do for a living. And that's sort of the approach that we take. And I think part of that is cultivated. It's not like fake that we're like, okay, I'm going to put on I'm going to feel shitty on the inside, but put on the stoke. But I do think we've cultivated, like, we want to have a household that feels positive, and we want to be around people who are positive, and we want to be grateful for like all the awesome gifts we've had in our life.
And then we go to bed at the same time.
Yeah.
We get up at the same
time.
time.
We eat some vegetables.
Fruits and vegetables.
Reinforces that.
I cannot stress just that sometimes underlying all of this complexity is real simple. I mean, if you want to tee up our kids, just ask. We just have a house full of ingredients.
The thing that, when our kids were little, people would say to us like, oh, I don't understand. Like, your kids, like, they don't have tantrums and they're like friendly and nice. And we used to laugh because we don't think we're, amazing parents. I'm sure we've messed up our kids in myriad of ways.
We'll find out.
We'll find out. It's an ongoing experiment. But one of the things that we did and that we were real militant about when our kids were little was making sure they slept enough and slept in the correct environment, and that we said no to a lot of stuff that was fun so that our kids could sleep, because we appreciated that. And so, that made our lives better, because we would wake up the next day and got to hang out with 2 little kids who were also stoked, because guess what? It's a 1-to-1. Like, if your kid's having a tantrum on the floor of Safeway, 99% sure they're under-rested. Like, kids who are well rested aren't having tantrums on the floor of Safeway, period. Like, they're just not. So we both instinctively knew as parents, like, the number one bang for our buck we could get as parents was making sure our kids slept enough, slept at the right time, slept in their own bed. We were militant about that, and it reaped massive rewards in terms of our family joy.
Colin, we could keep talking about this. We're hosting a huge training at our gym here tomorrow, and we are feeling under the gun. But I love this conversation so much.
No, I appreciate you. Last point is that made me feel so good. My wife and I are super militant about when our kids go to sleep. We say no to everything.
Parents. We are the strict parents.
Keep it up, and make sure they keep napping. Keep them napping.
Good thing I'm very bullheaded, and my wife is too. So peer pressure won't get us out of it. I'll tell you that.
No, it's not. Yeah, be okay to say no.
I appreciate you guys so much for coming on today.
It's so awesome to talk to you and get to know you a little bit. It's really cool.
If people want to reach you, they want to get out to you, if you have anything that you want to promote, please take the next 30 seconds to a minute to do so.
If you want to follow us on Instagram, we're at The Ready State. I'm at Juliet Starrett. We have what we think is a really cool, really inclusive coaching program called the Starrett System, and we help people implement those habits and practices we were talking about that we think are the most essential. So I think that's what we're excited about right now. Follow us on Instagram. We're at thereadystate.com, and mostly on Instagram. That's where we spend our too much time.
Awesome. Thank you guys so much for coming on.
Thank you so much, Colin.
Appreciate you guys. Yes. Nice weather out here. See you guys. Thank you.